What's going on, readers? My name is AG and welcome back to my channel. This time I'm going to be bringing you the review for The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott. This book was released on June 29th, 2021 and is the second adult novel in the High Republic Phase 1. Cavan Scott is known in the Star Wars community for writing Dooku Jedi Lost, as well as some comic series like the Star Wars Adventures and the High Republic comic book series, and he also wrote some other books that come later on, such as Tempest Runner. Just like last time, I'm going to be breaking my review down into three main parts. I want to talk about the plot and the pacing of this book. I want to talk about the characters, and finally I want to talk about some things that worked for me and some things that didn't. I will be talking about some spoilers throughout this review. Since this is the second book in this series, and a lot of the book relies on you knowing what happened in Light of the Jedi, I will be talking about some things that happened in that, as well as things that happen in this book. If you're like me and you watch book reviews in order to see if a book is worth your time, I'll go ahead and tell you this now, so you can click off this video and go buy it for yourself. If you liked Light of the Jedi, you're going to like this book as well. While it is a different flavor of book, it is still an enjoyable and albeit sad ride that will leave you wanting more. Do yourself a favor, go ahead and buy it and read it. Now that that's out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the plot of this book. This book does take place months after the dedication of Starlight Beacon at the end of Light of the Jedi. And at the end of the novel, we were shown a vision of the future from Elzar Mann of death and destruction of his friends and the fellow Jedi. And here it picks up with him trying to prevent that vision by becoming the Marshal of Valo. Valo is going to be hosting the Republic Fair, where they're going to be exhibits of every planet within the Republic, so that people may come and see the differences between the different biospheres, the harsh conditions, what animals live there, so that way they can, we're all the Republic and they can see each other that way. There is some stuff that happens that I don't want to give away, but basically all of the Jedi that we know from the last book, Bell, Porter, Indira, Nib, and Buryaga, are all on Valo to oversee the event and prevent danger. But of course, an attack happens from the Nihil during the fair. The majority of the book takes place during the days leading up to the fair and of the attack. While I did enjoy reading it, it can be overwhelming at times with how much action is happening all at the same time in such a huge chunk of the book that sometimes it feels like too much. But I think that's the point. To end this part on a positive though, I will say Cavan Scott knows how to drop jaws when it comes to reveals. You'll have to read it to see what I mean, but there is no bloated setup. He will have you feeling happy and excited and interested in what's happening, and then bam, your jaw will hit the floor and you don't know how to feel. On the other hand, we have the continuation of the Nihil story. Last time we saw them, Marchion Ro had assumed control of the Nihil, and the two remaining Tempest Runners had seemingly agreed to follow him. All is not so now. Marchion is on a quest to reclaim a lost relic of his people and is in a power struggle with the other Tempest Runners, mostly Pan Eta. The Nihil story isn't as prominent as it was in Light of the Jedi, but what is there always feels like it's more moving parts of a bigger picture than what's happening on Valo. Now, the characters of this book, like Light of the Jedi, are what sell it most for me, and they kept me invested throughout the novel. Most of my favorites from the previous story also appear here, and they feel like the same characters even though they're written by two different people. Stellan Gios is one we spend the most time with in these pages, and while he's mentioned in the last novel, this is the first time where he's really brought to life and felt a part of the trio. I loved his bromance with Elzar Mann. Each interaction with the pair felt like there were years of friendship that were built up before the events of the story. Stellan's story about trying to protect the Chancellor during the festival and, of course, during the attacks was enjoyable to read, but I felt it was the most basic of the main three Jedi stories. Bell is here as well, while he's trying to recover his connection to the Force after the loss of his master in the last book. And what I really like is it's a natural progression of the Padawan we've come to know from the last story. And it really feels like the same character that has grown. And I liked his story enough, and there are multiple parts of just his own story that made my jaw hit the floor. Lastly of the Jedi is Elzar Mann, who really gets to shine in this book. Time and time again, I have said that I think the two tropes of Jedi are overused. Jedi are either too good, who could do no wrong, and they're treated like higher beings. For example, like Vernestra Rwoh, or Avar Kriss, or even Yoda. And then there's those who are so emotional that they teeter on the dark side and they can't control themselves, like Anakin and Emery and Ezra Bridger. But finally, someone did this right. Cavan Scott was able to bring to life Elzar Mann, someone who struggles with the dark side, who has wants and temptations, but also someone who is able to recognize in a believable way what they have done or what they want is wrong. And every action Elzar has in this book has a purpose, and it feels natural with who his character is from this book and the last book before it. This is why Elzar Mann, in my opinion, felt like the most fleshed out person in this entire novel, and he was my favorite part of this book. Along with these Jedi are, of course, the new rogue Jedi bounty hunter Ty Yorick. While her backstory isn't fully realized here, I came to appreciate her inclusion in the story and her relationship with Elzar, and piecing together that she actually was a Jedi who left the Order, and I really hope to see more of her moving forward. Now, of course, I can't forget to talk about the Nihil. While the group does play a big role in the story, I feel like they did not have much to do with what's going on. All except Lorna D were not around for the majority of the story. I really liked finally being able to see how Lorna D's mind works, how her relationship with her Tempest is, and most interestingly, how her survival instinct is the driving force in every decision that she makes. And Pan Eyta is back, and if you've watched my Light of the Jedi review, you'll know that I think he got shafted in that book, and I didn't really get to learn about him, but this time he gets a lot of center stage and attention. From Light of the Jedi, I didn't think that he was going to turn into the aggressor of the Nihil, trying to best Marchion at every turn that he could, but I actually enjoyed it. Both of them trying to maneuver around each other's power without actually fighting each other was awesome, and it led to my favorite scene in the entire book, which I'll talk about later. Lastly is the new Tempest Runner, Zeetar, and of course everyone's favorite bad boy, Marchion Ro. For Zeetar, I don't care one way or the other. He's in the book. That's about all you need to know. Marchion, however, is still the greatest. In the last book, I always felt that he was 2 steps ahead of everybody else, and he always had something up his sleeve. But in this book, for the first time, we get to see what happens to him when his back is against the wall, when all of his cards are shown and he has nothing left to hide, and he still has stuff up his sleeve, and he's still always able to come out on top. I love him. He's cold. He's calculating. And you finally get some more of the backstory that I'm sure that's going to be touched upon more in the comics and the future novels about his motivation for wanting to do all these things to the Republic and the Jedi. All right, now let's talk about some things that worked for me and things that didn't. I really want to stress that the bromance between Stellan and Elzar is awesome. It's mint. I could read the banter between those two for hours. They really feel like friends who joke around and poke at each other each chance they get, but honestly care about one another and know when it's time to get serious. Spoilers, but there's a scene after Elzar has his temptation with the dark side where he is talking to Stellan and he says he needs help. And that's not something that Elzar really does in this book and last, is ask for help. And he's just coming to his friend for help, and Stellan doesn't joke or do anything. He's just listening to him, and he tells him that the first thing is admitting that you need help, and I loved it. Bromance all the way. Loden Greatstorm is in this book. Obviously in the last book he was captured by Marchion Ro, and even though he's in a few scenes of this book, like very few, man, are they so interesting and heart-wrenching. I am not gonna spoil any of that here, but dang guys, read this. And lastly, my favorite scene from the entire book has to be the standoff between Pan Eyta and Marchion Ro. They're on this planet with their new base, and the buildup is so engaging. They're trying to talk each other into doing, Pan's trying to talk him into doing something bigger, and Marchion's just like, no, that's not what we're doing. and it's such a buildup. It's so engaging, and the set piece is so cool with the rain and all the tempests are surrounding them. And then the dialogue is genius. And the resolve that it happened made my head spin. That is who Marchion is, and I need more. And I want to talk about some things that really didn't work in my opinion. The story, while it's good, doesn't feel as massive and as grand as Light of the Jedi. And while I know I keep comparing the two, it's kind of hard not to when they're supposed to be a continuation. In Light of the Jedi, each Jedi pair was in a different part of the galaxy, obviously, dealing with the Nihil in their own way, trying to figure out how the disasters happened, or Bell was on Elfrona, or Buryaga and then we're dealing them in space. It felt grand. And in this book, it really is just on Valo. And while that's not a problem, it's more of a letdown that the Nihil didn't feel as big as they did in the previous book. Something else that didn't work for me, and this is really just a nitpick, is that Cavan Scott sometimes uses jargon that young adults use now that felt really strange in a giant space adventure. For example, he would use phrases like full stop, as in like the Innovator was the most impressive ship, full stop, or peak, as in that was peak Stellan. The author is, of course, allowed to use any words, whatever they want to use to convey their message and their image to the audience, but this just felt so out of place to me. Lastly, there was romance. Now, I'm not opposed to romance in Star Wars, and if you've watched my previous videos, you might think so. I actually felt Scott did a really, really good job of writing the connections between characters. But in the greater context of the story, sometimes the romance felt shoehorned in for whatever reason. It just never felt like it fit for what was happening in this book. But that's just my opinion. Now, if you're new to this channel, I rate books on a page scale of 1 to 5 pages. And The Rising Storm by Cavan Scott is going to get a 4 out of 5 pages from me. I enjoyed it more than I did Into the Dark, but not as much as I did Light of the Jedi. So I find it to be this middle ground. It's an interesting read with great character work and jaw-dropping reveals that I feel is dragged down by an overwhelming amount of action and plot bloat in the middle of part of the book, to the point it feels like it's the end of the book is its own short story in another novel. But once again, that's just my opinion. But let me know what you thought of the book down in the comments below. As always, if you enjoyed this video, please like it and subscribe to the channel for more videos and reviews just like it. Until next time, guys, stay reading.